Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Today's story is absolutely gripping, so stick around. Let's dive in. You were just her nurse, not her daughter. The trust was always meant for us. My father Lawrence said that into a microphone on the main stage of a penthouse ballroom, 40 floors above the east side of the city, 300 guests holding their champagne in the silence that came after. The room had floor-to-ceiling windows on every wall, and 4 chandeliers throwing warm amber light across white lily centerpieces and pressed white tablecloths and a string quartet that had already stopped playing by the time those words finished landing. Eleanor's portrait stood on an easel near the entrance with a spotlight aimed directly at her face, the same face I had spent 8 years watching at very close range in very different rooms that smelled of clean linen and medication, and the particular quiet of a house where someone is slowly running out of time. I was at the back of the room near the windows when he said it. I had a glass of water I had not touched. Genevieve stood beside him on stage, wearing the smile she deploys when she needs the room to believe she is entirely above whatever is happening. My mother sat at the front table with her eyes on the tablecloth. 300 people, and every one of them heard every word. I did not look away from Lawrence. I stood completely still and let him see that. My hands were steady at my sides. The phone in my jacket pocket was warm from being held. The email had been sitting in that pocket for 3 years, and it was about to matter more than anything I had ever carried. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this all began. My name is Julian. I'm 34 years old. 3 years, 2 months, and 11 days before Eleanor died, she signed a document Lawrence has never seen. He spent 8 years building a plan around a legal structure that had already been taken apart before he laid the first piece. Tonight he is standing on a stage celebrating in front of 300 people, and he has no idea what is standing at the back of his own ballroom. I had the email. I had the box. I had 72 hours, none of which Lawrence knew anything about. The email subject line reads, "Irrevocable Trust, Blockchain Timestamp Confirmation, Case 47 Emmer." Lawrence does not know it exists. He is about to find out. For 8 years my official title was hospice aide. The real title, the one nobody gives and nobody pays for, is the person who stays. Eleanor was 81 when I moved my things into the spare room of her brownstone in Brooklyn on a Tuesday afternoon in late September. She had early heart failure, a deteriorating hip, and a family that appeared at the holidays and whenever documents needed a witness. I was 26. I had walked away from a position in financial services to do this, which everyone agreed was either admirable or inexplicable depending on how much they stood to inherit. Genevieve had used the word inexplicable within the first week. I am going to tell you one thing about Lawrence, and then I am not going to explain it. The morning I moved in, he came by without being asked. I was carrying boxes up the front stairs and he walked past me, picked up the heaviest one from the entry hall, and carried it to the top floor without a word. He set it down outside the spare room and stood there for a moment in the hallway with his hands at his sides, not quite looking at me. I thought we were the same kind of people in some way I could not name. I held that belief for about 3 years. Then I stopped holding it. 6 months before Eleanor died, I was reorganizing the papers in her desk when I found them. Bank statements, 3 years of them, folded together beneath her photograph albums in the locked lower drawer. Lawrence had been draining Eleanor's liquid accounts in small consistent amounts, each transfer carefully sized to avoid triggering any automatic review. Patient and deliberate. The way a person is patient when they have been planning something for a long time and feel no urgency because they are certain of the outcome. Folded between the last 2 statements was a document he had prepared himself. An amendment to Eleanor's will, dated 2 weeks before her death, written in language that erased me from every provision Eleanor had made in my name. The signature carried Eleanor's name in handwriting that was too steady, too controlled, nothing like the slow, careful script I had watched form at the kitchen table for 8 years. The notary seal was blurred, the way a seal looks when you copy a copy of a copy. I photographed every page without moving anything from its position. I replaced the statements exactly as I had found them, closed the drawer, and sat on the floor of the study for a long time before I made a single decision. On the fourth day, I called the lawyer whose name appeared in Eleanor's private correspondence. His name was Ashworth. He told me to come in the following morning. That same evening, an elderly woman in a dark wool coat arrived at Eleanor's brownstone. She stood in front of Eleanor's portrait without speaking to anyone. She watched Lawrence move through the room, the way you watch something when you know something about it that it does not know about itself. Her name was Sylvia. She had been a notary for 30 years. Lawrence walked past her twice and did not look at her once. The screen on my phone showed 37 photographs in my camera roll. Bank statements, page 1 through 37. Lawrence's name printed at the top of every transfer record. Before I tell you what happens next, I need you to know it has been a long time coming. Before I take you back to the beginning, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if this story has already found something in you. Drop your city and your local time in the comments. Now, back to Eleanor's brownstone, 8 years before the party. I thought back to the first year I had moved in. The hospice bed arrived on a Tuesday in October, a cold gray morning, the whole street feeling like wet concrete under low cloud. I had been coordinating the delivery since before 7, matching rail specifications to Eleanor's room measurements 3 times before I was satisfied. When the technicians left, I called Genevieve to let her know the equipment was in place. She laughed. She said, "Congrats, you finally have a real job." Then she hung up. I spent the next 40 minutes adjusting the rail height alone with a tape measure I had bought from the hardware store that morning because the brownstone did not have one. The room smelled of cedar and old wool, and the lavender sachets Eleanor kept in the top drawer of her dresser. I finished and went to make her lunch and did not call Genevieve again. That kind of conversation costs more than it returns. Years later, at a family Thanksgiving, Lawrence stood at the head of the table and announced that Genevieve had just been named CFO of the family company. The whole table applauded. I was at the counter carving the turkey. The kitchen smelled of rosemary and the particular tension that fills a room where someone has just been publicly ranked and the ranking is designed to land. The applause was still going when Lawrence turned toward me and said without lowering his voice, "You could learn something from her." I set the carving knife down on the cutting board and walked to the kitchen sink. I stood looking out at the backyard in the gray cold until I heard the dessert plates being cleared. Then I washed every dish in that kitchen by myself, and nobody came to help. After that came Eleanor's last genuinely clear day. She was sitting up when I came in, and she grabbed my sleeve with both hands and pulled me close to her face. She said, clearly and without hesitation, "I have already taken care of you. Keep my letters." Then she looked across the room at Lawrence, sitting in the armchair by the window, and said nothing more. That night, I sat on the floor of her study and read every letter she kept in the old tin box on the bottom shelf. I read until my hands stopped shaking and the words stopped moving on the page. That week, I bought a fireproof box from a hardware store on Atlantic Avenue. I started a small blue notebook. Every visit Lawrence made, every signature he requested, every date. A few months later, at a memorial service, a woman found me near the coat rack. Her name was Irene, and she had been the family's paralegal for 15 years. She pressed a folded piece of paper into my hand without meeting my eyes and walked away without stopping. The note read, "Your grandmother made me promise to watch." I went home. I opened the fireproof box and placed the note inside on top of everything else. That night I stopped pretending I was only a caretaker. I started keeping real records. I told myself the work would eventually speak for itself, that if I kept collecting the truth carefully enough, quietly enough, it would become impossible to ignore. I still believed that then. The screen flashed one reminder I had set 8 months earlier, in small plain text at the corner of the lock screen. Trust deadline. 72 hours. I had spent 8 years believing the work would eventually speak for itself. That morning in the side corridor, I finally understood it never would. Not in this family. Not in front of this room. If I wanted anyone to hear what the work had actually been worth, I was going to have to make them listen. An hour before the speeches, Lawrence pulled me into the corridor between the coach room and the service exit on the south end of the ballroom floor, just far enough from the party that no one could see us. The carpet there was deep red and thick, the sound-absorbing kind that costs money specifically because of what it swallows. He was smiling when he turned to face me. The particular smile I had been studying for 34 years, the one that has always preceded something I was expected to accept gracefully. "Don't embarrass us tonight," he said. "You're here as a guest, not as family." I looked at him. "I understand," I said. He held the smile for exactly one more beat. Then he turned and walked back toward the ballroom. I stood in that corridor after he left and listened to the muffled sound of 300 people on the other side of the wall, glasses and conversation, and the low note of a string quartet. I thought about the fireproof box. I thought about the email on my phone. I straightened my jacket and went back in. Lawrence has never asked for anything without being completely certain he would get it. I used to read that certainty as authority. What it actually was is something I understand clearly now. I found a position near the back windows, close enough to see the stage clearly, far enough from the front tables to be easily missed. That was exactly where I wanted to be. Overlooked, one last time. The ballroom was at its most beautiful that evening. Warm amber light and 300 conversations layered over the string quartet and the quiet movement of waitstaff between the tables. Eleanor's portrait watched from the easel near the entrance, the same composed expression she had worn her whole life. I looked at her from across the room for a long moment. She had arranged all of this 3 years before it happened. I was only required to arrive. Speeches began at 8. Lawrence was last, which is how he prefers it. He spoke about Genevieve with the practiced ease of someone who has rehearsed without wanting the rehearsal to show. He cited her revenues, her leadership record, the story from when she was 12 that got exactly the laugh he was building toward. He had the room. He has always known how to have a room. I had been in enough rooms with Lawrence to recognize the specific silence he manufactures before a certain kind of statement. He pauses until the room quiets itself for him, and by the time he speaks again, everyone is already leaning forward. He leaned into the microphone. He looked out across 300 people. He found me near the windows and held my face in his line of sight for exactly 1 second. "My daughter." The CFO. A pause. Long and deliberate. "My other daughter." Another pause. "She was just her nurse." The trust was always meant for us. The string quartet had already stopped. 300 people absorbed those words in a stillness that stretched for several seconds before a chair shifted near the front and someone cleared their throat. Genevieve's smile held, tilted by 1 degree, and corrected itself. My mother looked down at the table. 2 waitstaff near the service exit exchanged a look that lasted less than a second. "You were just her nurse, not her daughter." 300 witnesses. That is what he chose as his audience for that sentence. He said it into a live microphone in front of every person whose opinion he had been cultivating for 20 years. He said it like it cost him nothing. Near the rear service exit, Sylvia stood in her dark wool coat exactly where I had told Ashworth to expect her. She was watching Lawrence with the attention of a person who has been waiting a very long time for one specific moment and intends to see it clearly. The trust account closes in 72 hours. After that, it is gone forever. He did not know about the email. He did not know about the box. He thought he was 30 seconds from having settled something permanently. The phone screen showed one new message from Ashworth. 2 words. "We're ready." I left before the dessert course. I went back to the brownstone. The house was already half packed, moving boxes stacked along every wall in every room. Cardboard and tape and old paper, mixing with the last trace of Eleanor's lavender sachets still in the plaster, the scent that had never quite left, no matter how many times the windows had been opened. I sat down on the floor of her study between two stacks of boxes and opened the fireproof box. I took out her letters. I found the last one. They will try to take everything, but you were always my daughter. I held that paper against the light from the street lamp coming through the study window. I read those words until I could not read any more. Then I sat in the dark with my back against the cold plaster wall, and I pressed the letter flat between both palms, and I stayed there until the paper was warm from my hands, and I did not move until the street outside went completely quiet. The next morning Lawrence knocked on the front door. He sat across from me at the kitchen table. He looked at the boxes along every wall. He looked at my face. Then he smiled. Not the stage smile from the night before. The older one. The one from when I was a child. The one that means he is handing me a door that is actually a wall and calling it consideration. I know this is hard, he said. But you'll find your own way. He reached across and patted my shoulder. Then he stood, walked to the front door, went down the front steps, and got into his car. He believed the version of me that stays quiet was still the only version he would ever have to deal with. He had been counting on that for 34 years, and it had never once failed him. What he did not know was that the same person who had photographed 37 pages of bank statements 8 months earlier had been sitting across that kitchen table from him the entire time. After he left, I opened my laptop. The draft was already there. I clicked send. The laptop screen showed one message. Sent. I am ready. Activate. The next morning a text arrived from a number I did not recognize. Eleanor's notary, Sylvia, is still alive. She remembers everything. Meet me. It was Irene. I called her back within 2 minutes. She had been holding original meeting notes for 3 years, the handwritten record from the session in which Eleanor had signed the irrevocable trust. Irene had been the paralegal on record that day. Eleanor had asked her to keep the notes separate from the firm's official files and to deliver them to the right person when the moment arrived. She told me you'd know what to do with them, Irene said. I've been waiting to be sure she was right about that. I called Ashworth immediately, and he told me to come in that morning. His office was on the 14th floor of a building in Midtown. Morning light came through the Venetian blinds in hard, flat stripes across the conference room floor. When I arrived, he had the original trust document on the table, inside a sealed envelope pressed with Eleanor's personal wax seal, the same dark red seal I had seen on her private correspondence for years. He opened his laptop and turned the screen toward me. The blockchain record showed the timestamp in plain text. Eleanor had executed this trust 3 years, 2 months, and 11 days before her death. An irrevocable trust. Unchangeable from the moment of signing. Lawrence's forged amendment, dated 2 weeks before Eleanor died, had no legal standing. It never could have had any. There was one obstacle. The notary who had witnessed the original signing had since developed dementia, which meant her personal testimony would not hold in court. Ashworth pulled up a second file. Sylvia's biometric sign, in log from the date of the signing, her digital fingerprint record, the GPS coordinates of her registered device at the time of filing, and the timestamp of when she had submitted the paperwork to the county record. Not a memory. A government record. Permanent, public, and unarguable. I filed the motion to freeze the trust account that same afternoon, using the blockchain timestamp as the primary instrument. We had 48 hours before the deadline. Lawrence's attorney countered before 5 o'clock with the forged amendment and a supporting letter arguing Eleanor's reduced capacity in her final weeks. Ashworth filed the notary biometric log before 6. The log showed Sylvia's official county record had been filed 3 years, 2 months, and 11 days before the date on which the forged amendment had even been drafted. The amendment could not legally supersede a document that predated it by 3 years. The court granted the motion to freeze by early evening. We still had one exposure. The amendment contained language questioning Eleanor's mental competency at the time of the original signing. If that argument gained any traction, the entire structure was still at risk. Eleanor's geriatric specialist was a doctor named Farrow. I called her office first thing the following morning. I was told that Genevieve had already called the previous afternoon and stated directly that any cooperation on my behalf would result in a complaint filed with the state medical board. Genevieve had delivered that message with the confidence of someone who expected it to settle the matter entirely. I parked in the garage under Dr. Farrow's building and sat in the car for 4 minutes. I had Eleanor's letters in a folder on the passenger seat. I thought about Eleanor choosing over the years which letters to keep in that tin box and which ones to let go of, and I thought about the fact that she had kept exactly the right ones. Then I went upstairs. I spread 9 years of Eleanor's correspondence across Dr. Farrow's desk, organized by date. Handwriting clear and deliberate even in the final months. I showed her the letter dated 3 years, 2 months, and 11 days before Eleanor's death. Then I showed her the cognitive assessment from the same appointment in which the trust had been signed. Full marks on every measure. Every question answered correctly and without hesitation. Dr. Farrow read through the letters for 20 minutes without speaking. Then she signed the affidavit and handed me the folder. "Your grandmother had excellent judgment," she said. She was not talking only about the trust. That gave me 3 pieces from 2 independent sources: the blockchain hash from the public record, Sylvia's biometric filing log from the county archive. Dr. Farrow's sworn affidavit now entered into the court file. Each one independent. Each one permanent. Each one a problem Lawrence had not planned for because he had been certain there would be no need to plan. 2 days before the party, I went to the brownstone to finish packing. Lawrence came by while I was upstairs, on the phone with his attorney, his voice carrying easily up the staircase. I heard him say, completely certain, "She won't fight it. She never has." I was standing at the top of the stairs. I did not move. I heard his footsteps cross the entry hall. The front door opened. It closed. His car started and pulled away from the curb. I stood at the top of the stairs for a long time after the sound of the engine faded. I reached out and touched the doorframe at the top of the staircase. Eleanor had steadied herself on this frame every day for years, the paint worn smooth from the pressure of her hand in the same spot, morning after morning, decade after decade. I held my hand flat against that worn wood for exactly 1 breath. Then I went to finish packing. Irene called Ashworth that same afternoon and confirmed she would bring the original meeting notes to the party and would testify in open court if the situation required it. The trust account closes in 72 hours. After that, it is gone forever. Lawrence said that at the breakfast table the morning before the party. He poured his coffee. He did not look at me. He said it the way you confirm something you know is already done. He had no idea that 3 pieces of evidence had been sitting in a courthouse file for 48 hours. He thought he was 36 hours from having completed something permanent. He was right about the timeline. He was wrong about everything else. The portal shows 1 entry. Motion to freeze. Granted. Account locked. 24 hours before the party. Near the end of the evening, Lawrence returned to the microphone. "I want to address something directly." His voice carried the easy authority of a man who has never had reason to doubt his position. "She has no proof." The original will was updated 2 weeks before Eleanor's death, properly witnessed and notarized. Everything is fully in order. He said it with the confidence of someone who has counted every piece on the board and confirmed his advantage. He had no idea 2 of those pieces had not been on the board for 3 days. Ashworth stood. The room went still. He walked to the stage. Lawrence saw him. He held his face composed. Ashworth reached the stage. He set the envelope down. He turned and faced the room. "There has been a mistake." His voice was level and unhurried. The original irrevocable trust was filed and blockchain timestamped 3 years before the testator's death. The amendment Lawrence has presented was drafted after that date and has no legal standing. Lawrence's composure shifted by exactly 1 degree. Fraud. The word came out louder than he intended. 300 people heard it land. She manipulated a dying woman. We have documented proof. He turned toward the security staff near the exits and made a small motion with his hand. Ashworth did not turn around. He placed his pen on the table beside him with one quiet click. The climate system above the ceiling hummed low and steady. A glass touched a plate somewhere near the back of the room once, and then the room held completely still. He read from the page inside the envelope. $47 million. Executed 3 years, 2 months, and 11 days before the testator's death. The ventilation hum continued. Somewhere near the rear of the room, a glass settled softly against a tablecloth. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Ashworth opened his laptop and pressed play. Dr. Stop. Farrell appeared on screen in her office, holding the assessment file with Eleanor's signature visible at the bottom margin. Eleanor was fully competent when she signed this trust. Her cognitive assessments from that appointment show full marks on every measure. Competency was not in question on that date. Lawrence put one hand on the microphone stand. A chair scraped at the rear of the room. Irene stood up. She walked toward the stage with the unhurried certainty of someone who has been carrying something for a long time and knows precisely the moment to set it down. She climbed the 3 steps at the side of the stage. She placed the folder in Ashworth's hands without looking at Lawrence. I was present when Eleanor signed this trust, she said, and her voice carried clearly across the full room. These are my original meeting notes from that day. Dated the same day. Signed by Eleanor, by me, and by Sylvia, the notary of record. I kept them because Eleanor asked me to. I have been waiting 3 years for the right person. She paused. That person is here. 300 people turned toward her. Ashworth opened the folder. He read through it. He looked up at Lawrence. This trust was executed 3 years before your amendment. You have nothing. Lawrence's face drained. All at once. To the color of paper under flat light. His hands found the lectern and then slid off the edge. He took 1 step back, and his left knee buckled, and he caught himself on the chair behind him and gripped the armrest with both hands, hard enough that the knuckles went white against the dark wood. His mouth opened. It stayed open. No sound came out. He turned toward Genevieve. She had stepped back from the edge of the stage. The champagne glass she had been holding was on the floor beside her foot, stem intact, the pale liquid spreading slowly across the pale carpet in a wide dark arc. She did not move to pick it up. Lawrence has never in 34 years had nothing to say. I have waited a long time to see that face. Sylvia walked forward from her position near the side wall, with the unhurried certainty of someone who arrived exactly on schedule. She stood at the edge of the stage. I saw what he was doing, she said. Eleanor asked me to wait. I waited. I prepared everything she needed. It is done. I looked at Eleanor's portrait mounted on the wall behind the stage, the same composed expression, the same eyes that had looked across the room at Lawrence on her last clear day and said nothing, because she had already said everything that needed to be said, 3 years earlier, in a document no one but Ashworth had ever held. For the first time in 8 years, I was not invisible. Comment the word justice below. The screen on Ashworth's laptop shows the final confirmation. Trust transferred. Beneficiary confirmed. The account had 2 hours remaining when it closed. The trust account transferred into my name that same week, along with the Brooklyn brownstone and all $47 million in assets that Lawrence had spent 8 years redirecting toward himself. Lawrence and Genevieve were out of the brownstone by that Friday and moved into a 2-bedroom rental apartment on the far side of the borough, and I stood at the upstairs window and watched them load what remained of their things into the back of a single rented van, Lawrence carrying his own boxes down the front steps for the first time in 30 years. I hung Eleanor's portrait on the wall of the living room, in the same room where she taught me to read when I was small, and every morning now I reach up and touch the frame before I start my day, the same way she used to steady herself on the doorframe at the top of the stairs. There are people who decide what we are worth before we have ever had the chance to show them who we actually are, and some of them spend years making certain that verdict never gets reconsidered. When the people who were supposed to protect you choose, deliberately and repeatedly, to take from you instead, where exactly is the line between continuing to forgive them and finally choosing to protect yourself? If you have ever had to fight for something that was already yours, this channel was made for you. I am Julian, and for the first time in 34 years, I know exactly where I stand.